new evidence of different species down at the dinosaur tracks. We all know about the dinosaur tracks. Most of us have been down there. But this is going to be kind of interesting. This is going to be interesting because it's like I said, a new species of dinosaur. So I'm pretty stoked about it. I'd like to introduce McClure. He's the zoology teacher at OJC, or
Otero College.
Otero. And Mike Stevens, is that right?
That's right.
Mike Stevens, and he's a paleontologist too. That's about all I know of that guy. But welcome. Glad you're here.
All right, so I'm just handing out some iPads, and I'm going to get you guys set up on these. These are not for keeps. It's not Christmas. I'm not Santa Claus. These belong to Otero, but they bought these for us, and they do some really awesome things. And so when we get to one part of this talk, we're going to do a little interactive part of this. And the app that you're going to want to go to, and all you have to do it is just slide up on the screen, and you're going to go to something called Earth Viewer. So find the Earth Viewer, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. Hey, how are you? I got a few more of those.
Push that one.
All right, who still needs a tablet here?
Did I have one?
Absolutely. I might need to have a few people share if we get kind of towards.
Right, I can share.
If I need it, I might come back to you.
Oh.
So, yeah. So, I also want to give some credit to Mr. Corbett, who couldn't make it tonight. He ended up getting a really bad migraine, and so he had to stay home, and he apologized for not being able to make it. But he's the guy who I would say he's really good at a lot of the details. I kind of like the overview stuff. Mark can really drill down into some of the details, and I think Michael can probably drill down into some of the details. Maybe not as much on this, but on other things. He's got a lot of experience, and we're lucky. He's a volunteer at the college now. He goes up and helps work in our preparatory, whatever you want to call it. And he helps us prep out some of these fossils, and I'll show you some examples of those over here in a little bit. So anyway, I want to tell more of a story about how we came into doing work out at J.E. Canyon Ranch. If you don't know where this is, if you head south on 109 to Kim, and then take a right and head towards Branson, a little bit before you get to Branson, there's a turnoff to a road called, and it goes to J.E. Canyon Ranch. It's really kind of where most people would describe in the middle of nowhere. It's these red rock canyons that are out there. They're just beautiful. And if you're not from the area, and I think many of you are from the area, a lot of people don't even know it's out there if you're from the area. I did not realize how big the canyons were out there until I got out there doing this work. They're like mini Grand Canyons, and you can kind of see that right here. This is one of my former exchange students, a German student who attended Otero for a little while. His name is Josef Manhart, and he was always coming up with the best poses, and he told me, I need a picture on this rock here. So I figured, why not show this as the opening photo for J.E. Canyon Ranch. All right, so just to give you kind of an idea, I already went through this. The location is southeast Colorado. This is from our publication with a guy named Ben Kligman. I'll introduce you later. So a lot of these figures come from this paper, and I'll pass this around if anybody cares to try and read it. It's a struggle for me to read it too, because there's a lot of really technical terms in there, but we'll go through some of that as we go along. So J.J. Autry, one of your classmates, I think, right? J.J. Autry, a few years ago, contacted me and said, hey, the Nature Conservancy has purchased this 50,000 acre ranch called J.E. Canyon Ranch down by Kim. I know you've done camera trap studies. would you be willing to come out and help us run some camera trap studies? And what those are wildlife cameras that are motion sensor. Some of you have probably seen them. And so he said, we need you to come out and run a study with your students. And so we put up these camera traps all over this ranch just to get a wildlife survey. Okay, so that's how we got started with this. And so just to show a few pictures from the camera trap study and kind of give everybody their due here, this is some of the first images that we got. Now, I'm guessing everybody knows what this is. Okay? Mountain lion, puma, cougar, depends on who you talk to, what we call it. But this is a mountain lion, and the best thing about this picture is my student went up, pulled the SD card out of the camera, we stick it in our field computer, and we start looking at the images, and we see this image, and we're all excited, and we're jumping around. Like, this is the best picture we've had so far. And the very next picture was my student reaching to pull the SD card out of the camera. The very next picture. So we all kind of stop, look around, and say, all right, where is this guy? And then we looked at the date, and it was 10 days before we were there. So nothing had moved through there for 10 days after this mountain lion had come through. The other cool thing is my student's foot was right there. So we know he was about 5'10", and his hip was right at the point of the ear when we'd flip back and forth between these pictures. So that gives you a sense of how big this guy is. I don't know if you can tell here, but his paw was at least as big as my hand here. So really cool. Does anybody know what the next picture is? It's kind of harder to tell.
Is it a bat?
It is a bat. And just by random happenstance, we had a bat fly by, and they have night vision on them. So it took a picture, and if you get up really close, and if you want to come back and look at it later, you can see it. You can see where its ears are here. You can see a little nose here. You can actually see the bone structures in these very thin membranous skin layers that overlay the bones in this bat here. And so Chiroptera, am I right? Chiroptera? Okay, so Chi, tomato, tomato. No, probably not. So a couple of really cool pictures, and I just wanted to show those because they're very different in what we were finding out there. All right, so some of the early work involved students. And so this student right here, I'm going to point him out. His name's Brian. I don't remember his last name, but I probably shouldn't tell you anyway even. But he was one that was actually instrumental in helping identify this new species that we have coming up a little bit later. These are some students helping pull the SD cards from camera traps from the Nature Conservancy. I got to tell you, we tried this again recently out in Vogel Canyon. And if anybody sees camera traps that somebody has that say OJC or I think it's the National Grasslands Park Service, somebody stole about 4 of our cameras out there. So it's really hard to do it on public lands. That's what was nice about this is no one goes out and takes these cameras. The only thing bad that happens to them is if a deer decides to rub its antlers on them. So these are some students doing this, and this was the very first time we tried to measure what you're going to find out later, some dinosaur tracks. This is Christian Nielsen. He's from Chirá, and this is Argenis Blanco, who was one of my students, and he was from Venezuela. And he's now since graduated in engineering and moved on. So we had a lot of students involved in some of these things that were going on out there. So if you haven't gone to OJC or thinking about OJC, we try and do these things. Now, of course, the last few years, things got weird, and hopefully we'll get some of these sorts of things going again. So not only was there a lot of student activity, but, well, this is another student activity down here. We did a dig with TSJC. And I say we, that's a very loose we. It was Mark and Kimberly Monroe, Mr. Corbett's, you know Kimberly. They went out and dug these pits to look for Native American artifacts. And they did find things like a fire hearth, where Native Americans had set up shop under what's called the Medina Rock Shelter here. And I think the bigger pit is the one that had the hearth in it, where they would have built a fire. They found a corn cob about this big. And I know they've done some carbon dating on them. I don't remember the dates. Please don't ask me. This really isn't my area, but I do want to give credit for things that have gone on out there. And the lady who took these pictures is flying her drone, and she was from Trinidad State College. I took out the J because it's no longer Trinidad State Junior College, or it's now Trinidad State College. So anyway, she was flying her drone and taking pictures, and so you can get a sense of how high this rock shelter was. It's really fascinating. And the Chihuahua Creek runs right next to this, which is only running part of the time. It dives under the ground and goes into an underground creek for a while, and then it'll come back up. So the Native American people in that area were very cognizant of where the water was, where they could farm, where they could do some of those basic tasks. And so very important here. And then this is my son. I indulged myself by putting my own kids in here. But this is my son looking at some of the petroglyphs that are in this area as well. I will not disclose where these are because we want to keep them pristine. And a lot of people, unfortunately, if you've been to Bogle Canyon, aren't willing to keep things pristine. But one of the things I wanted to tell you about this, I don't know how well you can see this region right here, but this particular animal has sort of a curl up and over. Does anybody know what that probably represents? Anybody have an idea? Bighorn sheep. And they thought for a while bighorn sheep didn't exist in this canyon anymore. And this was one of the clues in my understanding, and I don't have firsthand knowledge of this, but this was one of the clues that the state used to decide to reintroduce bighorn sheep back into this area. Are you confirming this, or are you just hearing? I didn't know. You're like, yep, I know about this. So they reintroduced them, and now the largest bighorn sheep herd in the state is out in the southeast corner of Colorado. Everybody thinks they're all up in the mountains. Or I think it's over 350 head right now is what it is. It's a massive herd. So again, there's also anthropology, archaeology, all those things are out there too to be studied. Now let's move into a little bit of the paleontology. This is, now he's happy. So I've got some really small credits up here. I apologize. They're just websites where I pulled pictures from museum sites, things like that. And a couple of things I want to talk about here is the age range we're talking about is approximately 250 million years ago to 200 million years ago moving forward in time. Or, do you disagree with these numbers?
No. I was about to.
Okay.
You want me to talk about?
No. There is one in here that is probably shouldn't be in here, if that's what you're thinking. This is a metoposaur. This was a giant salamander, basically. Getting ready to go after what we think, or what is depicted as a phytosaur here, also a phytosaur here. These would have been kind of the top predators in that time frame, and they had these big conical-like teeth that were very sharp, and I've got one over here that I'll pass around here in a moment. Morgaducodon, which is an early mammaliamorph. So there's some debate on if it's a full mammal or not. But we know that mammals also arose all the way back in the Triassic. A lot of people think, only after the dinosaurs. But they actually existed through the entire time frame of the Jurassic. Most people know Jurassic. Mammals were there. They were just tiny. They hid. They stayed underground. They did their thing, but they did it on a very small scale. And then this picture over here has some cynodonts of I don't know what type. And an Etosaur here, which we're going to go into it a little bit later. And Etosaurs are kind of the prominent land organisms, I almost said mammals, fauna that would have existed in this time frame. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, because there's some fun stuff here.
Go ahead.
So Triassic, like everybody thinks that dinosaur ages, Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, right? So everyone thinks Triassic is part of the dinosaur age. Actually, in this time period, dinosaurs were maybe this big. They were just starting. Most of animals like this guy, these guys are actually in a big group called Pseudotsuchians, which the only living group of Pseudotsuchians still alive are crocodiles. Like alligators, crocodiles, caimans. There's a whole lot of crocodilo. They call them like crocodilomorphs, like a mammalia type animal. This is crocodiliforms. So the crocodiles and the dinosaurs were actually fighting for who would take over. The dinosaurs really don't take over until the Jurassic. So this is end Triassic, which is really cool. We actually, what's really important about the formation out of JD Canyon, the formations around here that are end Triassic, science actually has a whole lot of questions still about the end Triassic, because there's a big extinction that kind of knocks out all the Pseudotsuchians and makes way for the dinosaurs. So it's actually, we've got a really important area out here that is begging for research. So that's what's really kind of cool about it. And the early mammals, which he's going to talk about, which we found a jaw of, there's still a whole lot of unanswered questions about them too. And they're not quite mammals yet. They're getting close, but they're not quite mammals yet. So this is a really fun time period, and really cool that we have it here.
Wow. Thank you for jumping in. All right, so now we're going to get out your devices here, because a lot of people think, well, this is what we look like all the time. So open up your apps, the Earth Viewer. Do you want to go through this? I do have a few more, yeah. I've got 2 more here, so let's see.
Yeah, I'll use yours if you don't mind. Will you navigate? No? Cool. So that's what the Earth Viewer app looks like.
So again, this is actually something, I use quite a bit in several of my classes. It's just a tool that I like to use to give students a sense of what things look like as we go back through time. So once you get to this screen, what I want you to do is grab this little bar. Now mine's not going to do it because this is just a snapshot. So you got to grab this little bar and drag it back down into the Triassic, and look what happens to all the land masses. Oh wow, yeah, huh? Technology. When it works, it's great. So if you think about longitudes and latitudes, you can see we're pretty far north on this. I got a big yellow arrow approximately where we are. If you click on, there's a little square up in the corner, like Foursquare thing. If you click on that, you can add the cities in, and you can add the grid lines. You can just add the different things you want. If you want to see where mass extinctions occurred, you can add those in. So there's all sorts of fun toys that you can play with here. And so you just got yours running. Yep, there you go. So the other thing you can do is if your landmass disappeared, you can grab the globe and rotate it so you can see where it went. And so in the Triassic, does anybody know, and I know somebody back there knows, what is it called when all the land masses are together?
Pangea?
It's a supercontinent.
Supercontinent, also called Pangea, that's right.
That's about the right rotation.
As you move forward in time, it splits into 2 major continents, Laurasia, and then you got Gondwana as well. So we split apart as we move through time. And again, notice how it counts backward. That's why I kind of wrote the numbers the way I did. So as you're moving back in time. Now, some of those animals I showed earlier actually began back, the cyanodonts began back all the way in the Permian. Then we had a massive Permian extinction, and then we moved into the Triassic. And whenever you have an extinction, it opens up the world for a lot of new species to come about. And that's what Michael was talking about. You have all this space to be exploited by life. Essentially is one way to look at it. So that's what was happening. So now I'm going to show you that same figure you guys were looking at. Just move forward. Instead of being way up here where you were in the first image, now we're down here. And the equator is right here. So we're not that high. We're in the tropics now. Tropic of Cancer. Right, yeah. So we're kind of in that region during this time. So we would have been much warmer. There would have been a lot of different fauna, or flora as well, not only because of the different organisms at the time, but because of the climate. There wouldn't have been trees like you see out here. There were no flowering plants that existed at this time. We would have had things like cycads and, what's that?
No grass.
No grasses because they're flowering plants, that's right. So there's all sorts of different organisms, horsetails. If you've ever been along any of the canals here in the valley, there's something called equisetum, and it has those little tubes that all stick together. I used to think it would always be cool as a kid to get under the water and breathe, and I could sneak up on people. But those are a type of horsetail that still exists today. So those are the things, but they would have been like tree size. We would have had much bigger plants of different types. Ferns existed, and they would have been much larger as well. Conifers, which we're familiar with, they would have been in existence at this time. So you can see we're in a different area, and there's a massive landmass. So imagine the weather differences that would have occurred too, right? We wouldn't have all the same weather patterns we have now. All right, so what does it look like in this time frame? So when we go out to this ranch, we're in a time machine. We're going back in time. And so the strata also tells us a story, and the strata is just the layers, if you're not familiar with that term. So we have all these different layers of rock and sediment and all these different things that are there, and I'm not a geologist, so I'm not going to pretend to tell you what I know what they all are, but we know we're in what's called the Triassic red beds out here, and that's because of the materials in the rocks, a lot of iron, things like that that make them red. And there's some debate right now as to which particular formation we're in. There's something called Chinle and Dockham. Chinle is kind of what you find out in the petrified forest. There it is. The petrified forest is considered Chinle. And Dockham, and I'm going to look at the camera here, so if Brian Small is watching this, he'll at least know I'm giving credit to this. There's Dockham, which is kind of over in the Oklahoma, Texas panhandle area. If you've ever driven through, there's lots of red rocks out in that area as well. So it's part of that, it might be part of that formation. We're not exactly sure. Maybe it's just a small lens of its own unique thing. So if anybody is a budding geologist and wants to write a dissertation, talk to the owners of the ranch and see if you can get out there and figure out what these things actually are. So there's still some debate on what this actually is, but we do know it's from that time frame. And, I need to point out, does anybody know Bruce Schumacher? Did anybody ever meet him? He was the regional paleontologist who worked out of La Junta. That's him up there with Christian Nielsen. They're measuring this strat column, and each little layer, they describe what it is. Okay? And so when we go to the next picture, this is looking down from where they were at some of my students down below. And this is what Bruce put together. And in these areas are approximately where we find some dinosaur tracks in this jaw that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. All right, so I need to probably move faster because I got to get to a concert here at Rocky Ford High School in a little bit where my kids are playing. So how do we know we're in this time frame? Some of the things we look for, we compare what we call index fossils. And so these are fossils that you see in a lot of places. And this is, yeah, Michael, thank you. Can you start passing some of those around? So index fossils are just fossils that we know were found out in the petrified forest. And they've been characterized. We know what they are. Okay? And I'm probably not doing it justice as to all the things that we know, but this is essentially a couple examples. These are both what we call osteoderms.
That's the first thing I'm going to pass around.
Yep. And an osteoderm is like an armor plate. If you've ever seen an alligator up at the alligator farms or anything like that, they have these hard, they look like leather, but these are bony plates that preserve quite well, and there's some of them going around here. And we found some of these, and we know they are from these specific organisms. And so we can say, oh, we know in petrified forest we find these things, so we know we must be in at least that same time frame because there's a window of time. Now it's millions of years, but it's still a window of time.
So this would be from an Iedosaur. Iedosaur is one of the group of Pseudoscians, right? It's a crocodilomorph that eats plants. If you think about that for a minute, a plant-eating crocodile, kind of it's oversimplification, but that's what's going on with this. And so it was for a long time. These animals were thought. Everyone thinks everyone knows what an ankylosaur is, right? Everyone into dinosaurs as a kid. The big armored dinosaurs with the club tail. For a long time, paleontology thought that these guys were ancestors to them. They're not. They're separate animals. They just were living in the same type of lifestyle, the same niche, so they kind of had the same look to them.
And it makes sense that you would make those mistakes until you study the bones well enough to understand that they have different lineages. So again, these are just different types of osteoderms. One of the coolest ones up here is this Desmatosuchus. He's got these big spikes on its shoulders. This guy's not as impressive, but probably a little more common. So moving on. Now, the story I'm going to tell about this is I was riding with JJ out at the ranch, and he crosses this creek, and he stops kind of at the edge of the creek bed. And I look out the window, and I think Sue Kiefer, if anybody knows who she is, Sue Kiefer was on this ride. I look out the window, and I say, JJ, you got dinosaur tracks out here. And JJ says, yeah, I know. I said, has anybody ever described these? And he goes, I don't think so. And I said, do you mind if I try? And he said, sure, why not? Talked to the Nature Conservancy, and they were all right with that. And so we had 12 tracks initially, and you might not be able to see them, so I'm going to label them here. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're just little divots. I'm going to back up again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we'll show them to you a little bit better. But needed some help, so again, students are free labor. So I got my students out there, and we did some cleanup. And my initial description of the 12 tracks I sent to Bruce Schumacher, and if Bruce is watching, he might remember the story. I sent him I sent him a picture and said, hey, we got some dinosaur tracks. They're in an area I've never seen them before. And he says, yeah, ignores me for a couple weeks. So I went out and I did all these measures. I did a whole bunch of stuff, and I sent it to him. He's like, I think you might actually have them. He's like, I'm sorry I ignored you. He's like, but I have people bring me dinosaur eggs all the time, and they're just rocks. So, he basically apologized. And anyway, we're out here cleaning this up. We get student cleanups. And lo and behold, we ended up exposing 17 tracks. Now, this is not at the same trackway that you guys all think of. This is south and a little bit east by probably 15, 20 miles as the crow flies. Now, of course, you can't get there easily. You got to meander all around to get to it. But we have 17 tracks, and you can see them better here now. You can see them, they're raised up in this set of pictures, where all we did was take a whole bunch of individual pictures, and there's these wonderful programs now that stitch them all together so you get this one big view. And so I got really curious because they looked kind of weird. They looked like they weren't regular footsteps. So I started thinking about that too. And our very last footstep, we actually have, or footprint, the Pez print, we have digits. And you can see a couple little, what we would say are big toes on our feet, but they're the digits of this organism. We do have a couple of manus prints as well. If you ever had a manicure, that would tell you which appendages we're looking at, right? Manus prints, your front feet. And so we have a few of those too, but they're not always there. And so I talked to some experts, and one of the guys named Martin Lockley, who's an expert on these tracks, said, oh yeah, this is Eoseropus. And so I got to publish on this with him as well. So some of the things that I contributed is I went through, and with a whole bunch of people, we took measurements of the different angles, Pez angles, of these feet. And it looks like this guy was kind of walking like this, 1 foot this way and 1 foot more this way, almost kind of like with a limp. And I'm hand waving because we, of course, don't know. Maybe that's just how they walk. Maybe there was some slick mud here and he just kept sliding. Who knows? We don't know that, although that would probably show up in the tracks if that was happening. But we actually were able to do this and do some analysis and find out that the left Pez angle was a little more outward compared to the other. So we can actually do some really interesting just gait analysis from things that are 210 million years old. So we went through and we did this. So was this irregular gait because of pathology? Did it have a broken leg or something? Or was it born with some sort of malformed foot? Who knows? Was it the matrix that it was walking in? Did it have a sticker in its foot? Or is it typical? We don't know. So we have to leave those interpretations open. But we do know it has some oddness to it. The other thing that's really fascinating here, if you pay attention, the early tracks are pretty far apart. As you get closer to the end, they get closer together. It looks like it's slowing down. The other thing that happens is we have manus prints here, 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 and then they disappear. It was maybe doing something like this. And they're is some evidence that these guys are what we call facultative quadrupeds, which means part of the time they walk on their four legs, part of the time they're on two. So just to show you what they might have looked like, and we don't know, this is from a prehistoric fandom wiki. It's hard to find good artwork of these things because most scientists don't want to say, but it's kind of fun to think about. So something like this. And then there's also a Rheosaurus that was found about this time frame a little further south in South America, and they might have been pretty closely related. So I put this in as well for a relative size comparison. He's right, most dinosaurs would have been much, much smaller, but a few of these early prosauropods, early long necks, were walking around too. And you can tell that based on those footprint sizes, which are about this big.
So something weird to think about. Most of the animals that we think of, they all started out 4 feet, right? Everything, lizards, amphibians, mammals, 4 feet. Dinosaurs started out at 2. So the sauropods you get later, they went back down. And that's what this guy's in the process of doing. He's an early sauropod, and sauropods being the big long neck things you see in the Jurassic way later. He's starting to live more on 4. So, it's pretty cool.
All right, so now to the new species, new genus and species. All right, so I don't know if you can see that guy off in the distance there. That's me getting up off the ground. It requires my hand on my thighs now to finish getting up, especially when you're out there on your hands and knees all day looking for dinosaur bones or whatever bones are there, not necessarily dinosaur bones, but I was out there, and that is the approximate location of where I happened to pick up a very lucky rock. And so we're going to hand out a couple of these. The gray one is about 2 times size. The red one is probably about 5 times size. Those are just approximations there of the actual organism. So it was a happy accident, and that's where I said this student helped me out. I was walking along, and Mr. Corbett was talking about the dinosaur tracks, and one student got bored listening to him, and I was off wandering around. Don't tell him, oh, dang it, he's live. So I'm walking along because he's doing his thing, and I'm just kind of scanning for bone fragments because there's a lot of them out there. And the student comes up behind me and says, "Hey, Mr. McClure, what are you looking for?" And I said, "Bones." And he goes, "Oh, what do they look like?" And I looked down, and I said, "Here's one." I didn't look at it or anything. I just handed it straight to him. And he looks at it, and he's got better eyes than me, and he says, "Mr. McClure, this has teeth." I said, "No, it's not a tooth," because I don't listen. I said, "It's not a tooth." He goes, No, it has teeth." And I said, "Give me that." And so I took it back, and lo and behold, I holler at Mark. He comes over with his hand lens, and we're looking at this. And let me backtrack a little bit. I want you to appreciate how lucky we were. We were right on the edge of Purgatory Creek here. One big flooding event, this guy was gone. We would have never found it. Now, floods around here don't happen that often, but one event could have destroyed us.
You hear that spring?
Yeah, occasionally it happens. So the color on this TV isn't perfect, but I don't know if you guys can see in here. This is what it looked like when we picked it up. And so we only see one side of it here. And Mark and I are freaking out. May I borrow this red one real quick? So, see this big thing right here? What does that look like on our teeth? What are these up here? Incisors. Tooth differentiation doesn't generally happen unless you're talking about mammals. So Mark and I are like, oh my gosh, we just found a new mammal in the Triassic. We're going to be famous. I don't know that we really thought that, but I'm sure in the back of my mind I was thinking that. So this tooth right here is new for this particular species. So we get excited. We call the world's expert, or email the world's expert in mammal biology and evolution. And this is Dr. Lau. He works at the Field Museum in Chicago. And then we came across this guy when we went to meet this guy at the vertebrate paleontology meeting in New Mexico. This is Ben Kligman. He was a PhD student at the time who was an expert in sphenodontines. So Dr. Lau, he was in China when we emailed him. Within 6 hours, he emailed us back and said, I've got to see this, because he got really excited as well until he saw it up close. And he's like, oh, this is really cool, but it's not a mammal. It's a Sphenodontian. And then this guy, who's like 6'4", 6'5", Ben Kligman, he's standing next to me at our poster presentation. I show him these pictures, and he's doing this. This big guy, and he's probably like 240 pounds. He's just this big athletic guy, and he was jumping around like a little kid, and he goes, can I help you publish? Can I help you publish? And I said, well, we're going to need your help, because we were not experts at all in this area. So Ben Kligman, who is now Dr. Kligman, is a big part of helping us describe this as well. So let me go ahead and hand that back to you. And so we're going to go through a couple pictures. So we now have Dr. Lau and Dr. Kligman, who helped us identify this initially. All right, so this is the only living organism today that is still considered a Sphenodontian. It's called a Tuatara. They only live down in the New Zealand area. And so this would be the only distant relative of this guy that we're just talking about here. These are some other Sphenodontian jaws, and a spheno means wedge, and dont means tooth, so that means wedge tooth. And you can see they all have these sort of wedge-like teeth. Okay, so lots of variation in these organisms, and they seem to be running rampant during this time frame. If you read any of Ben's other publications, you'll find out that he's finding all sorts of these guys out at the petrified forest, which is where he works. I'm sorry, I got to keep rushing here. So I just went through the meaning here, and what's amazing now is, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but you can take rocks with fossils in them and you can CT scan them. We've all probably known somebody who has had a CT scan on their bodies, right? Now you got to have different energy to do this. You wouldn't want to stick yourself in one that does this. But you can basically get a 3D image, and that's what those models are from. We sent this to Virginia Tech, which is where Ben was. Ben sent it to Duke. Duke has the CT scanner for this stuff, and they CT scan this. And so now we get to see what's up against the rock as well. So what it's embedded within. So we can see it from all angles. And we can see, well, I just went through the story. We can see that incisor. We can see where the wear facets are, where teeth actually rubbed against each other. And if you look at the red one especially, it's the outside of the jaw that was exposed. We knew this guy had a little bit of an overbite because there are wear facets right down here. So we can tell a lot about the upper jaw from the lower jaw, where that wedge or where that grinding surface would have been. These would have worked like scissors, maybe to cut whatever short plants were in the area. So, and of course it was wearing them down too. I'm going to keep going. You can answer questions at the end. All right. So here are some things that are, I already mentioned the wear facets, the Mammallian groove, which is this big groove. If you look on the inside of the jaw, there's this groove that runs right through here, and that would have been for nerves and blood supply. We can actually see foramina, which are the holes that go into the bone where you find, or again, where nerves and blood vessels and those types of things go. So there are holes. If you look at the very end, the mental foramen is present on that red one. You can really see it. It's this nice, perfect hole going in the end. So let's go around, take a look at that. From this, we can also slice it up and see what's on the inside. So we can see that there would have been a marrow cavity and things like that within inside of this, this particular bone, this jaw. So again, we even see some enamel left. Enamel is one of the hardest things that exists that we know of that's natural. So it's still present on this front. Do you have anything you want to jump in real quick?
No.
Okay. So how do we know what this is and how it's related to everybody else? So again, computers are great for this. We have algorithms now. And so what we do is we look at all these features. And this is a really robust jaw. It's thick. If you go back a couple slides here, notice some of these are really thin and wispy. This one's thick. It's got some girth to it. So it was probably chewing on things that were pretty hard. It needed a robust jaw to be able to get through those. And so we mark all these really cool areas, and then we feed it into a computer program with all these other organisms that have similar features, and we say, oh, it has this, it doesn't have this, it's kind of like a big fancy dichotomous key, if you're familiar with that, yes or no. Does it have this? Does it not have that? And then we compile all that information together and we figure out kind of where it falls. And so we find that it's in here, in this region, and you can see right here is what we named it. And it's called Trullidens Purgatorii. And do I not have the name of it? Did I put it up here already? Yeah, did I not?
It was on that slide you were just.
It was on the slide?
Keep going.
That one? That one?
There you are.
Okay, there it is. Trullidens Purgatorii. I didn't even know my own slides. I knew I had it in there somewhere. So Trullidens Purgatorii was named this. Probably all guess why this one, right? Found on the banks of the Purgatory River. Trulla means spade or shovel. Dens is tooth. So we thought, you know, this looks like it could be something that's using for digging or maybe digging up roots. Who knows what it was for? Probably more rhizome than roots. Did I get that right? But it was probably using that tooth to do some digging and do things like that. So Trullidens Purgatorii was the name that we all settled on. We all kind of worked it out, hashed it out together. We considered naming it Bruce Schumacher or something at one point, but he said, heck no. And now, so our guy is the one up top there. And this is why we got so excited, because it has that big tusk-like tooth or incisor-like tooth. If you compare it to a squirrel here, you can see it has a similar sort of tooth. So there are organisms today alive that we got excited about thinking, oh my gosh. One of the first jaws I looked at was a possum, and the jaw looks somewhat like that. So I was thinking, oh my gosh, here we go. So where is it now? Because it is called a holotype, it's the only one of its type. It is in the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. Now you can't just walk up and look at it because it's not that impressive. They put those things back in the storage area. But if you're a scientist and want to study it, you can go and get at it. If we can ever get our repository open, maybe we can get it back down in this area. All right, so that's it for the majority of this. Go ahead.
I'm working.
You're working. He's helping us with that. All right, so other areas of interest. This is something for me that that is fascinating. Number one, we think we found another jaw in here, but it was too wispy. And this was found inside of what we think are burrows out there. So it almost looks like a prairie dog colony, right? All these little holes. And so we're doing some hand waving on this too. We're not exactly sure what it is. But there's all these interesting structures out there. And this particular bone was found in it, but it was so flimsy it couldn't make the trip, unfortunately. So we cut it out, and by the time they tried to prep it a little bit, it had completely disintegrated.
Not my fault.
Not his fault. No, this actually happened at Virginia Tech, and I don't want to call anybody out on that either. Just so be it for what happened here. So the area where the burrows are, I'm calling them burrows, even though they may not be, is just below where we're measuring that strat column. This is what the burrow looks like from above. There's one that makes a T shape. So a lot of people are like, oh no, it couldn't be a burrow. It's got to be roots. And I said, well, I've never seen a root make a T like that. And then you can see another one that's kind of going at a oblique angle coming up and out of there. So there's some really interesting evidence for things out here. Now, I found another one that's really disintegrating up on the rock. Well, this is the infill. And so I put my hand there for scale. It was really hard to do anything else because I'm on kind of a cliff edge here. I'm just trying to balance long enough to get the picture. But there are other things like this. And we've tried to analyze the infill versus what's on the outside to see if there might be any biological-like material in there. And it's been really hard to get any of that to reveal secrets. So this is something I'm fascinated with. And I would still love to go back and do more work on. Now it's owned by a private person now. The Nature Conservancy doesn't own it anymore. So I don't know that we're ever going to really get to go back out there. I hope we can, because this is something I would like to tie up a loose end on and see if we could figure out, are these really burrows? And was that a sphenodontian jaw? Were these guys burrowing creatures? Not a lot of lizards that I think burrow or make their own burrows anymore. There's a few, but not a lot. So these are in that same sort of category. Maybe these were some that did. You can correct me.
A lot of skinks make their own burrows.
Do they? Okay.
Yes. Matter of fact, the one we have here, the cool skink.
All All right.
burrows.
You taught me something tonight.
Yeah.
All right. So finally, I just wanted
so
to.
I wanted to say it's entirely. I agree with you. It's entirely possible. Looking at the skull, looking at the way the skull is shaped, looks like a gopher. Why wouldn't it dig holes?
Why wouldn't it?
Why wouldn't it? It's a small creature. A lot of small creatures during that time period, they were burrowers. So it's entirely possible.
Sure. So again, we can't say with certainty right now, but it's certainly there's some clues that point us in that direction. So, oops, I'm going the wrong direction. There we go. There we go. So just some thank yous, and it's not meant to cross out Mark there. It's just a thing that, but Mark didn't come. I crossed him out. So Mark Corbett, of course. I didn't get your name in here because I didn't know your.
That's all right.
Anyway,
I'm new.
He's new to us, but again, Michael, thank you for coming tonight, and he's doing a lot of great work now. But Ben Kligman, Bruce Schumacher, Martin Lockley, Dr. Lau, Brian Small, all of these guys are really the paleontology experts that have gotten us to where we are on this. J.J. Autry for even getting me out there to look and take pictures. Christian Nielsen for his help. Argenis Blanco, and Otero College for allowing me to do this. My primary job is supposed to be teaching, not running around in the field. So I'm glad they let me do this in the summers and use their name to go out and do this sort of work. And then the Nature Conservancy for allowing us to do it as well. And the current owner, what is his name? Bobby Hill is the current owner, and he did let us out there a little bit to do some work. But we need to get with him and try and convince him that we're not going to cause any damage and get back out there and do some more work. And then this is a new group that's just starting up, the Southern Colorado Natural History Society. If you want to be part of that, you're going to have a sign-up sheet, right?
Yeah.
Mark said you would have a sign-up sheet. If you're interested...
Mark said.
Yeah, Mark did say.
Okay, I guess I will.
So if anybody's interested in maybe becoming part of that, provide us your contact information, email, something like that, and we'd love to reach out to you, and maybe you can help prepare some tea. So
Yeah, I've already got 2 people who want to learn how to prepare. I've been trained on how to prepare. So we're getting our lab together as we speak. We're actually buying things still. So we're getting things together, and I'd love to pass on what my knowledge on how to prepare fossils. I prepare them so the smart people up there, the PhDs and stuff, can then study them. That's my job. So.
it is an extremely important job, because if you're not good at that, you don't have bones to look at or to look at. I'm going to leave these here if anybody wants to look at them, and I can answer questions about them later. This was the first publication we got, and one advantage of having lived through COVID is I had time to write. I wasn't at school every day. I got to work from home more often. So this is the first one on the dinosaur tracks. And I'll just pass them around, and you guys can take a look at them at your leisure. And then I have 2 copies of the one with the new genus and species. And I'll certainly let you guys keep them here at the library if you like. So I'm going to go ahead and pass these around for you guys to look at.
Well, I have 2 questions.
Yes, I should open it up for questions.
Well, the artifacts that you brought in, can we put them in this display case?
That is why we brought them. You can have them on temporary loan.
Yes, yes. And
Since I'm
we'll display
collections
it,
manager,
we'll lock it up.
Since I'm collections manager, we'll talk about that after.
Awesome, great.
Yep, he's prepared to tell you the story about how to take care of them and everything. So just a couple things before I leave. Please come and look at these. Handle them carefully. What's that?
I was going to say, hey, after this, we'll move this chair, and if people want to come by, we'll leave these here. And if you have questions or you want to talk about them, I'll be right here for a little while, and we can talk about that stuff.
So I was lucky enough to find a piece of that burrow, not that one burrow, there's lots of them out there, but this shows some of the infill and kind of what it looks like underneath. It immediately goes under and starts to spread in both directions. So it was a fascinating piece. It was an easy piece to pick up, so I brought it back. I have it marked with geolocation and everything, so I know where it came from. I even have a number on it here. But we have several, this is just one example of what those burrows sort of looked like. So again, I thank you all for coming. Actually, I should say, are there any other questions? I'm sorry I'm rushing, but I want to see my kid play in the band. Yes.
Where's that sign-up sheet for the?
Right here.
You got a sign?
Where's that for the society?
for the society.
I will get out a piece of paper and start taking names and numbers and emails.
He's taking names. All right, I do need to collect all of the tablets.
And if I could have all the fossils back up here. Where are they now?
Thank you. Where are those other models? I should have 21 of these.
Since you're recording, we've also brought, we've already talked about these specimens. This specimen right here is actually from the Morrison Formation.
Okay.
That is an allosaur tooth.
Oh, wow.
They shed those often and regularly because they regrow teeth. This is from the Triassic. It's tentatively an Iodosaur.
Cool.
And this is a carnivore tooth from the synapsid. Synapsids were one of the primary carnivores during the Triassic.
Very cool. Very impressive teeth. That allosaur tooth is wild.
And this one right here is crocodile, Pseudotsuchian tooth. Neither one of these are fully identified yet. This is not fully identified yet. This is obvious. Mm-hmm. People have seen enough of these; they know exactly what they are when they see them.
These were recently collected?
These were all collected around 2019,
okay,
prior to the pandemic. And we will be up and running and hopefully collecting by, once it dries out in the spring, we'll probably be back out.
What is this one?
That is from an Iodosaur, and that is one of the armored
plates, huh?
Plates, yeah. Scoots, plates.
Wow. And so, again, when are you going back out?
Hopefully we start up late spring and into the summer. And we start going back to some of these sites that we can still have access to.
Cool.
To do some further research and recording to fill in the blanks.
Nice. Anything you want to add?
If you want to volunteer.
Hey, if I can come carry a camera, I'll volunteer.
Hey, we need someone to record what we're doing.
Very good. We'll make it a deal then.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate the presentation. It was really neat.
You're welcome.
Very cool. 4, yep, you too. 4, the Rocky Ford Museum and the people of Southeast Colorado. I'm Adrian Hart with your Southeast Colorado News.
That's all right. I don't have any cousins.